Hi, this is John from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you're listening to the Tennis Podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast, introduced beautifully, commandingly there by John in Cambridge, Massachusetts. You can get yourself an intro or a shout out on this show at any time of the year. The link to become a friend of the pod is in the show notes. Friends also get access to the Barge, our online community platform, Hannah's column, our brilliant writer, our entire archive of Friends shows, and at least 25 bonus episodes of the Tennis Podcast every year, including Tennis Relived, our history series, our Grand Slam review shows, Tennis Podcast Meets, our new edition for 2025, which will continue into 2026. We'll continue until we've met all the tennis players in the world, so I think we've got a good time to run on that. And of course, 12 live Q&A shows every year as well. Plus, we still have some pet mascot slots to fill, some guest editor slots, and some Grand Slam prediction slots available for a couple more weeks as well. Our presenter mascot slots have been snapped up. More news on that in the coming days, folks. Watch this space. Matt Roberts is here. Hello, Matt. Happy holidays. How was your Christmas?
Hello. It was very, very nice. Thank you. I am still at my parents', heading back to London tomorrow, but it feels nice to be doing a podcast again. I feel like we did 4 in the week leading up to Christmas, and then to go a week without one is a bit sort of destabilising. But here we are, we're back, and it's good to see you, Catherine.
Were you, Matt, on Christmas Day doing like the Seb Coe, Steve Ovett thing of sort of practicing your podcasting, knowing that none of your rivals would be, just keeping that edge over everyone else?
I actually wasn't. I can't speak for Catherine.
That, folks, oh, you don't want to know what I was doing on Christmas Day. Folks, that is the voice of Charlie Eccleshare from The Athletic. Charlie, hello, welcome, thanks for being here. How has your holiday week been?
Very nice, thank you. Yeah, but I guess tennis came crashing back into our lives today with all that happened a few hours ago, which we'll get onto.
Yes, spoiler alert. Thank you for the segue, Charlie. Today was the day. Nick Kyrgios versus Aryna Sabalenka in the self-titled Battle of the Sexes, an event staged by management company Evolve, who also represent both Sabalenka and Kyrgios, and which here in the UK was broadcast on BBC One. In the US, I think it was on Tennis Channel, I believe. It was won by Nick Kyrgios, the men's world number 671, 6-3, 6-3 over Sabalenka. The match played in front of a crowd of apparently about 6,000 inside the Coca-Cola Arena in Dubai, an arena which incidentally has a capacity of around 17,000, but not the full 17,000 were put on sale. So they were pitching 6,000 as a sellout crowd. Look, we here at the Tennis Podcast haven't made any secret of our feelings about this event ahead of time. Matt, how did our experience of watching the event today match up to all the expectations that we went into this with?
I think from a tennis perspective, my kind of worst fears were realised, I suppose, in that you had a clearly unfit Nick Kyrgios giving what seemed like a pretty half-hearted effort at times, beating the world number 1 women's player Aryna Sabalenka despite court adjustments in her favour. And I kind of just come out of that thinking, well, sure, like, of course, that was always the most likely outcome. Great job lifting up women's tennis, Aryna Sabalenka, by taking part in this, as she kept saying would happen all along. And look, I'm not going to think any worse of women's tennis because of this, but you bet some people will. An event that totally sort of did not need to happen will fuel the fire of misogyny that we know is out there. So from that point of view, as I said, all my worst fears realised. I think what I was most surprised by was how sort of bland and meh and really lacking in show and style this was. In fact, the production of it was pretty poor and cheap seeming. Certainly on the BBC, there were a few merciful moments where we lost pictures for quite a while, and the commentary duo just had a sort of wide shot of the stadium and had to talk over it while we were hearing the background noise, and the picture was breaking up, and it was just really, really poor. And the players were trying to do a bit of back and forth, but they weren't mic'd up, so we couldn't hear them. I thought the court with the different dimensions looked really, really odd and jarring. And everyone in the arena looked pretty bored, and there was zero vibes coming through the screen whatsoever, really, really flat. So, obviously, Sabalenka and Kyrgios and the people putting on this event the whole time were sort of distancing themselves from the seriousness of it. They were hearing the criticism and they were saying, look, it's not that deep. It's going to be entertaining. That was kind of their counter argument. And look, maybe some people found it entertaining. I just don't really think it even was that. It seemed to fall really, really flat to me.
Yeah, no way to underline a lack of vibe than inviting Karen Hashanov to just inexplicably be present without any particular explanation.
Making a late run for the sort of Holger Rune, what are you doing here award for 2025.
Look, I echo everything that you said there, Matt, and I think Charlie, your colleague James Hansen at The Athletic put it brilliantly in a tweet earlier. If your entire defence against charges of setting back women's tennis is it's a show, then it had better be a show. And it really wasn't. The whole thing to me looked cheap. It looked like it was done on the cheap. And I know events are expensive to put on, but I think they had some decent sponsors going on there. The fact that it was on the BBC and on Tennis Channel would have helped bring in significant sponsor backing, I would have thought. And that whole situation just sort of emphasised to me how much this was just a hollow money grab for everybody involved. And I couldn't quite believe my eyes that I was watching this unfold on BBC One during sort of prime BBC One hours on the Sunday after Christmas.
Yeah, I think broadly it needed to have stakes or vibes, and it ended up with neither really, because you actually watching it, you were like, the way this would work, obviously 1973 there were huge stakes, it really meant something, and those stakes don't exist now, thankfully. The only way it would have been interesting in that sense was if there was needle, if they really didn't like one another for whatever reason, and I don't mean that Kyrgios Sabalenka necessarily, but whoever was facing each other, or you kind of lead into the vibes of it and you really do make it a show. And at a bare minimum, like you said, I think if they had mic'd them up, that could have been quite fun. Like they are both, people will have their views on Nick Kyrgios certainly, but he can be reasonably entertaining. He that could have been quite interesting seeing them, or mic'd up at change of ends, that sort of thing. But there wasn't really that.
Able to explain why Karen Hashanov was there.
Exactly. Little cameo from Karen Hashanov.
Heard the explanation.
It was. I mean, and then there's that weird moment where like Kaká and Ronaldo were sort of
why were they
entered.
So late?
They were, but they weren't even unveiled in any sort of particular way. They were just sort of there, and they just had to wait. And then, they
had to shuffle past Peter Crouch.
Yeah, Crouch.
Yeah, justice for Peter Crouch. Why did he not get his own entrance time?
Yeah, that's true. But even and then, like, you had the Sabalenka doing the Macarena thing, which again, if
Charlie,
it
that
had,
was my low point of the day.
yeah, but I think
really
if it had
made
been,
my soul slide out of me. It was so bad.
but if that, but that, it was, that's what I mean. It was also confused because it was like, it's both. What is this a kind of? Does this have any importance, or is it just a hit and giggle? If it's a hit and giggle, fine, lean into that, and you have Sabalenka doing the Macarena or whatever. But it was all, I don't know, it just found itself caught in between those two things. And actually,
it was poorly planned, didn't it? Like, even down to the fact that, okay, Sabalenka had that big entrance in the sparkly coat, which, you know, fine, whatever. But, like, prior to that, Nick Kyrgios had just sort of wandered onto court holding it looked like the child was sort of showing him the way because he had got lost. Like, it was really
Child
bizarre.
usher.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and also, I think what happened was there was obviously a lot of hype going into it, and to give it its due, it did get a lot of attention. You know, with the fact that it was on the BBC, as you say, in this primetime slot, what a coup that is, you know, for any event. And, you know, all the big broadcasters were covering it and talking about it in the lead up, and probably will do tomorrow. There will be, you know, quite a lot of reaction to it. I think a lot of people probably felt quite numb once they started watching it because it was just a bit confused as to what it was trying to do. And as you said, the court sort of gave you a bit of a headache, that kind of jagged, it looked like a really old, really bad graphics computer game where things didn't quite line up properly.
It looked like there'd been a mistake with the machine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is as well, like, it's hard in a way, because I agree with you, Matt, what you were saying about, you know, clearly it's not gonna, you know, there are going to be a lot of people who have bad takes in this in bad faith, you know, about what it means to women's tennis and all of that. For me, as someone who, you know, follows the sport very closely, this sort of thing isn't revelatory. Like, we know that, like, this isn't a surprise, like, that Sabalenka is losing to Nick Kyrgios. We know, you know, this has been done to death. Like, that's not interesting. I actually found it more, but I didn't feel like it. So I don't feel it did necessarily set women's tennis back hugely. I actually felt more sorry in a way of the two for Kyrgios, because Sabalenka next month goes and tries to win a 5th Grand Slam title, whereas this is sort of Kyrgios's tennis reality now, isn't it? I mean, doing these sorts of events.
But
you know, Sabalenka can move on from
any
this.
Different tennis reality than a big payday?
Nah,
which is
maybe
what he got
not
today.
Yeah,
And a load
maybe
of
he's fine.
publicity.
But this will. But there's a finite amount of things like this you can do, really, isn't there? I mean, there's huge diminishing returns. Like, you can do it once.
I think Evolve.
But there won't.
Thinking up ways to deepen that well every day.
Yeah, I suppose. But like this got a lot of attention because it was a kind of novelty thing, and yeah, maybe Kyrgios maybe the interest in him will sustain across the world. You'll be able to find venues that will put things on for him. But I don't know, like Sabalenka, this will be quite quick. You know, when she's competing for the Australian Open title as the world number one, I think this will feel like quite a distant memory. Whereas I don't really know, you know, he is far, far less relevant in the world of tennis than she is. And yeah, I think she'll, you know, we'll talk to her about it in Australia. She'll be grilled about it, but then it will become a kind of secondary thing. Whereas, you know, Nick Kyrgios, I don't know. I don't know sort of how much more we'll see of him in competitive tennis anyway.
Yeah, I certainly don't feel sort of sorry for Nick Kyrgios that this is all that his sort of tennis life has been reduced to. But you could really tell that was certainly true by the quite sort of extraordinary statements he was coming out with in the build-up to this, talking about how, you know, this is going to be one of the most watched sporting events of the last decade, and how he said afterwards, this is all anyone in the world has been talking about for the last 6 months, you know. And it was these sorts of statements around the event and talking about what a sellout it was that were just indicative of this event taking place in this culture of delusion that we now live in, where you can say things and they can just be entirely unchallenged. And and they're sort of presented as fact, and I sort of found that element of it really, really sort of tough to stomach as well. I thought, in terms of my expectations of the day, I would say the BBC did actually cover it with a slightly more sort of critical lens than I was expecting, and I thought Russell Fuller, particularly in the studio, provided a really valuable perspective in the kind of build up. But I was kind of left there thinking, sort of, if it is such nonsense, which Russell Fuller is sort of putting across really well, why are you showing it? Like, the sort of constant tension was kind of existing as I was watching it. It was a very, very strange feeling having that on the BBC.
Yeah, the whole thing was emblematic of the age, wasn't it? Of unchallenged sort of bent reality, just stated as fact, and populism. There's a lot of people out there, most of them men, saying, well, lots of people watched it, so that justifies it. That justifies its existence and its prominence in our discourse. I mean, lots of people would have watched it if they were both naked. Like, does that justify that concept? Like, surely there has to be more than ratings. Like, we want as a people to be better than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question that comes from it is, does it mean anything? Does this tie into a kind of exhibitionification of the sport? Where we're going to see more and more of these. Like, we are seeing more of those, and some are more high profile than others. Is that what tennis, as the US Open knows, you can't necessarily schedule the matches you want. The fact they never had a Federer Nadal match, let alone a final, that's where it differs from a sport like boxing or something like that. So, and luckily on the men's side, Sinner and Alcaraz play each other all the time anyway, so you don't need to kind of fix things in this way. But yeah, or is it just a kind of weird one-off thing that happened that we'll look back on in the way that we do that time Nadal and Federer played on a half grass court, half clay court? I don't know.
That was great.
Unfortunately, yeah, I was going to say Matt is going to defend that with his life. Matt's still watching reruns of that on YouTube. Sabalenka was talking about wanting to play more. I don't know, like, it hadn't even occurred to me that this would be anything other than a one-off. But maybe that was spectacularly naive of me.
I mean, one of the areas, as the US Open has shown, one of the areas where, and the Hopman Cup and events like that, like, where tennis can be, there is such a potency, is that it's one of the very few sports that men and women can really play together. That will always be like an incredible USP that the sport doesn't really lean into. Now, obviously this is a kind of very mangled, strange form of that, but I do wonder if a Grand Slam like the Australian Open would look at this and wonder, is there a fun, entertaining way you can do it? So you get, I don't know, like a mini tournament in one of the days leading up. It's because also the problem with this match was that it got quite boring quite quickly, because it was kind of like, what is it? They're sort of playing at 3/4 pace. It was on a slow court. But if you did a kind of, I don't know, where you've got Coco Gauff playing against one of her good mates on the ATP side, could you do a sort of best of 3 games or something? Just make it a bit of fun, or maybe you do just do it as mixed doubles. I don't know, but I don't know if there's like a kernel of something in this that other events will look at and think this might be entertaining. I mean, not 1 point slam, not quite that sort of novelty, but I don't know.
Are we that desperate though? Are we that desperate that we're looking this hard for kernels?
Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the Slams are looking at the mixed doubles event that the US Open put on and wondering whether they can do sort of equivalents of that. And they probably don't want to just like completely copy it. So they might be looking at other innovative ways they can do it with different rules and that sort of thing. I do think the miking up bit is really important to like show a bit of the player's personality and make it fun. And I think that was a big misstep.
I mean, I honestly think, it looked like a cost saving to me. It looked like every possible cost had been spared. You know, there was no electronic line calling. There was no feature made of the 9% smaller court. It genuinely looked like there'd been a mistake in the manufacturing of the court. Why was the court grey? I was thinking, is grey the cheapest colour to print? Is grey paint the cheapest? It just looked so shite, I thought. And it made me think about the first time when this event came onto my radar, all of our radars, watching some social video of Kyrgios and Bublik during US Open. And I remember thinking, sort of picturing in my head, that this is probably what it would look like, and I would barely pay any attention to it, and it would come and be gone and be a gimmick, and that's that. Like, the craziness, the single most crazy thing to me is that this was on BBC One prime time this afternoon, and that I was asked to go on, well, I mean, all sorts of things over the course of the last 24 hours and 2 weeks or whatever. But, you know, I went on 5 Live this morning to talk about it. Charlie, you went on Radio 4 yesterday evening. Like, that's what's crazy to me. That people have treated this thing as if it would be anything other than a bit of nonsense.
Yeah, and that is why I am kind of curious to know what... I mean, it was hard to really gauge much of a response, but I do wonder what people who aren't as close to tennis did make of it, whether they were entertained or whether they did have their... like, how quickly their curiosity waned. Because, as you said, like, clearly there was interest. There was interest from all the broadcasters and newspapers and... The idea of it, I just don't know how much then the reality did interest them, and I'd be interested to know what the ratings were, or how quick the drop off was, how much people sort of stayed with it, especially as, you know, in this country the BBC's footage, which that, you know, they were getting from Dubai, was cutting out, which kind of added to the sort of like, what is this feel of it?
I think that was the feed that was cutting out. I think that was universal rather than...
Yeah, that seemed to be what they were saying.
Yeah, but pretty big disaster, that, I would say. You're only broadcasting one match, and a significant portion of it was... the feed was dead. Now, I suspect that the rights were given away for free in a lot of cases, because, you know, it being on prominent broadcasters generates value to sponsors. You know, that can be a good play. Nothing wrong with that kind of arrangement. It's not uncommon. So, you know, there won't be any lawsuits at play here. But if that had happened during a Grand Slam final, say, you'd have rights holders suing the event for not delivering on what they'd paid for, frankly.
The thing that I've spent, I think, the most time sort of thinking about is Aryna Sabalenka's role in all of this. And look, we know she, you know, has never been a great sort of messenger for the cause of women's tennis and women's sport. She's been an amazing example of it in terms of her play and her prowess and her competitiveness and her sheer talent and ability. Like that, I'm not questioning that at all. But in terms of like championing women's tennis, she's never been great. You know, in terms of like the comments that she's given about, you know, I know that you were waiting for the men's matches. Thank you for coming to mine. Little things like that. But my mind did, Charlie, go back to kind of the article that you wrote right at the start of the year, which was about how she is this tennis superstar, and yet her endorsement and her brand deals don't yet match up. And obviously I think that has changed quite a lot since you wrote that article, obviously with her move to Evolve. But it did sort of strike me as a bit of a sort of desperate act, I don't know, from Aryna Sabalenka to sort of get involved in this. And obviously it's happening now at the end of the year, but this idea would have been generated and talked about way earlier in the year, when maybe she was still in that state of not quite having the endorsements and the brand deals that have since come. And therefore, in terms of her future, I would sort of hope that she would realize that she doesn't need to take part in an event like this. Like, she is now getting much more of what she deserves, but I don't know whether she quite thinks like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my read on it is slightly different. Like, I do feel there was an obliviousness from her as to how this would look. I do genuinely believe that. And yeah, that piece I wrote was was kind of about that her sort of profile and how much of a star she is, and her great personality and vibe wasn't matching up, and you know, a lot of that is to do with her nationality. That's the reality, and I think she's done incredibly well over the last year or so from a branding perspective to sort of overcome some of those disadvantages. But yeah, I think long term, I don't know how well this will play for her, but I do think it did come from, because, you know, we know what she's like. She's great fun. She's a great vibe. You know, we were all there in New York after she won the US Open, and she came in an even more extravagant kind of outfit and entrance to her press conference, having won the US Open, even compared to tonight. And to be fair, you know, if you can get her on it, like I remember interviewing her at the last year's WTA finals, and she was talking about that push for equal prize money and that sort of thing, and how, you know, the previous year in at the WTA finals, when it was such a farce, you know, had been this kind of watershed moment, and they didn't want that to happen again, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I do think she went into this thinking that it could be this bit of fun, and I think she really would have been surprised about the kind of level of backlash. And I think even she, I think, will not like the fact that, because, you know, I don't think she will have been grilled necessarily in the immediate aftermath of this match, but I think come the Australian Open, because that will be the first time that we'll get to talk to her after it, she is going to get a lot of questions about it. And I think we'll kind of be a bit like, what's the big deal? It was a kind of bit of fun. And I don't think necessarily would have thought about the wider ramifications of it, and why it isn't, as she's been saying, you know, necessarily going to be a step forward for women's tennis and the WTA Tour.
Can't wait for that press conference. Who's pumped? Okay, anything further on the Battle of the Sexes? Until the next one, apparently. What a thought. Okay, that is it for part one then. Join us in part two for things that aren't the Battle of the Sexes. Welcome back to part two of the Tennis Podcast, where we turn our attention now to tennis, the actual ATP and WTA tours, and kind of anticipation of the 2026 tennis season, which will be getting underway very shortly. And in fact, before we do that, a revisiting of a story from 10 days or so ago that just keeps on rumbling, because, well, actually, very shortly after we recorded our last podcast, Juan Carlos Ferrero hired some sort of crisis communications person. Like big sort of Olivia Pope energy from Juan Carlos Ferrero. Suddenly, I think on Christmas Eve, he popped up on every Spanish media outlet that I have ever heard of.
David did say he's a talker. We will find out.
I thought it might be a few more
Me too.
Days, hours, a bit more. But anyway, it turns out David, of course, was bang right. Juan Carlos Ferrero is indeed a talker. Here is a selection of some of the very revealing things that he had to say on the demise of his coaching relationship with Carlos Alcaraz. Now, obviously, this is one side of the story. We haven't heard from Carlos Alcaraz yet. It seems like he's got no intention of saying anything until, of course, he comes to Melbourne and he comes to his pre-tournament press conference. But this is what we know from Ferrero about the split. He said, everything seemed like it was set to continue. It's true that when the year ends, there are certain things at the contract level that have to be looked at. And as in any new contract, looking ahead to next year, there were certain things on which we did not agree. It may be that they could have been saved if we had sat down to talk. But in the end, we didn't sit down and we decided not to continue. Ferrero was quick to shut down speculation around money. He said the financial issue wasn't one of the problems that led to the split. His comments addressed rumours in the Spanish press that had suggested he had demanded a dramatically higher salary in order to remain in Alcaraz's camps. But he dismissed that. He dismissed reports that a clash between training bases played a role. Alcaraz had grown up training at the Carlos Alcaraz Academy in Murcia, run by his father for more than 30 years, while Ferrero operates the Ferrero Tennis Academy in Villena, where Alcaraz spent much of his formative time on tour. Ferrero said, "We've never seen this as a rivalry. We've gradually come to understand that given the demands of the tour, Carlos would want to spend more time at home. We offered the academy so he could train whenever necessary, but it was never an obligation, never. I think maybe we both need some time to fully process this breakup. It's not so easy. Right now, I'm hurting. These kinds of relationships are difficult to end overnight. I gave it my all. I poured my heart and soul into this project. I think I invested a huge amount of time, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of work, and I think it was important to find the team and the people who let me do it. In the end, I'm incredibly grateful for something like this." He also, now he could have been being playful here, but when asked if he would ever coach Yannick Sinner, he did not say no. He said, not right now. It's all a bit raw with Carlos, but you never know, which I found very fun. I think the biggest single takeaway from this for me, Matt, is that he and Carlos Alcaraz haven't had a conversation. That this split so seismic, it prompted our first ever emergency YouTube live in very dramatic behind the scenes fashion. It was not preceded by a conversation between the two men involved.
I completely agree, Catherine. That was the key line that I saw as well. If we would have talked, we could have sorted it out. Like, it just seems like madness, frankly, for any relationship to end like that, but let alone one that has lasted so long and been so successful. Like, what are we doing here on all sides? And from a Ferrero perspective, you could tell that he was hurting. He seemed really, really sad in these interviews that he did. I watched the one that he did with Marco, and there was he was sad. He was sad, and it was kind of all heightened by the fact that Alcaraz's trophies were there behind him while he was talking, just sort of as a sort of physical reminder of what they achieved together. Like, as you said, obviously this is Ferrero's side. We haven't heard from the Alcaraz camp. We haven't heard from Alcaraz himself, other than his statement. So for a full picture, we'll probably need to wait for that. But based on what we know so far, I am really not getting good vibes about this at all. It really feels like it could have been handled a lot better, and therefore benefited both sides a lot better.
It does seem a really weird situation, because clearly it seems like there were simmering kind of issues that if they'd really wanted to resolve, they could have done. And it got to the point where someone involved didn't really want to resolve those issues. Like, think of the way like Sinner and Cahill have managed to somehow find solutions to keep it going, even when it looked like it wasn't going to, for whatever reason. And then this, where they seem to that clearly there are differences and they haven't been able to work them out. I just don't know how much will there has been to work them out, or not enough will, seemingly.
It's pretty amazing to think that what 10 days ago we did that emergency live stream and podcast reacting to the news. We had Matt Futterman on the show, and look, at the time we were fronting up that we had very little information, and we were really just speculating about what might have caused this split. And sort of Matt's take was that most likely this was a symptom of Alcaraz growing up and taking control of his team and his kind of his business and starting to make decisions for himself as an adult and kind of shed the paternal figure that had guided him through his formative years and now wasn't the right fit for him as a grown man. It now, again, it's just one side of the story, but based on the information that we have, it sounds like potentially the opposite of that. And what's happened is Carlos Alcaraz having extremely little agency in this. And okay, you know, if he actively didn't want this to happen, I suppose it wouldn't have happened. But it sounds like something he is passively allowed to happen that's been driven by other people in his team rather than something that he has driven himself, which I find worrying.
Though I guess it is in Ferrero's interest to make it seem like that. Like if you're trying to, you know, he's trying to present it to future employers potentially as well, and it looks far better on him if it's like, well, you know, the man himself didn't want to get rid of me. This was about intermediaries and misunderstandings.
Saying I've fallen for Ferrero PR.
He's got you hook, line, and sinker.
Yes.
No, who knows? But like that, you know, it would stand to reason that that would be the kind of story he wants to tell. It may well be completely the accurate one, but we don't know yet, and it will be really interesting to hear Alcaraz's side. How sort of candid he will be, that's another question.
It's hard to imagine him coming into press in Australia, and look, even if this is his perspective on what's happened, it's hard to imagine him coming in and saying, yeah, it was me. I wanted rid of Juan Carlos. I did the deed. I'm the hitman. It's hard to imagine that. It does sound a lot like Ferrero is going to pop up with another player sometime fairly soon to me, and that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, the Sinner obviously would be like the sort of dream story, you know, in David's honour, the kind of WWF, WWE story there, you know, turning heel and coaching Alcaraz's great rival. But the problem is if he stays on the ATP tour, it's hard to be that relevant unless you're coaching one of two players, really. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because Alcaraz, you know, we're used to him being so kind of, his disposition is so sunny, and especially at the start of the year, and it's all fresh and new exciting vibes. And whereas he's going to be getting a bit of a grilling straight off the bat, which I don't think he'll be too comfortable with and too keen on. I mean, he's not really, it's so rare that, you know, he's not that this is a controversy as such, but it's obviously a huge off-court talking point. And yeah, I can't think of too many times where he's really going to have been grilled in this sort of way. No, whereas obviously Sinner has had so much experience because of the doping ban and
even then,
things.
You know, every other player was getting asked about Sinner's, and of course Alcaraz got asked about Sinner's doping situation, and yet somehow the tone of the questioning was just sort of different, because it felt like, oh, you know, you just don't, you know, quite, it doesn't feel right to quite sort of go there with Alcaraz. But this is, I agree, I think it's going to feel different to any press conference situation we've ever had with Carlos Alcaraz, and I'm not sure I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm sort of am on one hand because I live for drama, but on the other hand, not. Yeah,
because I do think it could genuinely affect him, which again, because you don't really want to do that to him in some ways, because he feels like a very sort of pure, quite chirpy personality, and I think we've seen him. He has been affected by things, even like the way Djokovic gets in his head. I do think, you know, he can get a bit unsettled and a bit rattled by things, and I wouldn't be hugely surprised if it did just put him off kilter a little bit at the start of the Australian Open, and possibly throughout.
Wouldn't be the tennis podcast with some pointless speculation on the basis of absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Taking Jannik Sinner out of it, who do we think Ferrero might pop up to coach next? if we had to place our bets. He's done Zverev. That went badly.
I think Charlie's made a good point, though. Like, I think on the ATP tour, you'd have to go for someone pretty young that you could kind of nurture in a similar mold to Alcaraz. Obviously, like, you know, there's only one Carlos Alcaraz. He's not going to. I don't think he's going to like discover the next Carlos Alcaraz. But if you're going to like someone ranked 10 to 20, it's such an obvious like step down, but still within a similar mold of coaching, you know, like coaching at the top. Whereas I think if he went to a younger player, someone he could try and work up the rankings, like you can have success that way. I think success is going to be easier to measure and have with a younger player than it is, you know, someone ranked 15 to 20 in the world right now. Because how do you make such a difference? I mean, maybe he can. Maybe he's that good a coach that he can be the one to make the difference. But I think he knows the reality of how good Alcaraz and Sinner are, and closing that gap is not going to be something that he's going to take on just for anyone.
Because, I mean, links-wise, someone like Flavio Cobolli has trained, you know, he's spent off-seasons with them, you know, he'll know them well. He's a kind of... But again, he's a sort of Alcaraz light in some ways. You know, he tries extravagant things, sometimes doesn't make the wrong shot selection, but he's just a different league. So it would feel like a bit of a step down. I mean, yeah, it would be incredibly exciting if you went for someone like Fonseca, I guess, and was like, let's try and take you. You know, you've been on that similar trajectory to Alcaraz. Now let me take you on those last few steps. Like that's one of the few moves I think where you could be a bit like, wow, yeah, that is a pretty exciting project to be working on post Alcaraz.
Yeah. Okay. So Ferrero to stay in sort of paternal coach mold.
I do worry as well, just on that, like the kind of the Alcaraz side of things. I can imagine, like, as David said prophetically, like he is chatty. I do fear as well there'll be, you know, it might be the Australian Open, it might be other tournaments, that more stuff's going to come out from Ferrero that Alcaraz will then be quizzed up, which obviously we will all lap up because that will be great. But I don't think it'll be hugely helpful. You know, you can imagine Juan Carlos said in commentary or in an interview this about your game or this about your opponent or whatever it is, and I think he'll feel quite uncomfortable with that kind of questioning.
Exposing.
Exactly. And it wouldn't surprise me, like, who knows, he could be mouthing off during the Australian Open quite feasibly for Ferrero.
Well, presumably Spanish, if I don't know who the Spanish rights holders are for Australian Open, potentially Eurosport. It certainly used to be Eurosport Spain. I mean, if I'm a producer for them, I'm putting 100%. In a call to Ferrero and getting him on the team.
I do think there is also a scenario where, not in the short term, but in the long term, Alcaraz and Ferrero work it out. And actually, Ferrero's next move is potentially back to Alcaraz. Like, I think it's not likely in the short term, but given the statements, given the love that clearly is sort of still there between them, I could, and maybe if Alcaraz has a dip, you know, maybe if Alcaraz does have that dip in form, maybe it is a bit of a sort of realization on both parts that actually this would be better for both of us if we can work this out. Like, I don't think it's happening anytime soon, but it wouldn't shock me if that happened. You know, if it's a kind of
Murray
going back to Lendl kind of thing in a couple of years or so.
The problem is, and look, sort of wider career, Alcaraz has got plenty of time, but he's also sort of got a ticking clock, hasn't he? Like, this Australian Open, this next tournament, the first one after this seismic split, is his most important of the year, and the one he wants, the one he would sacrifice a second slam for this year. So he kind of, you know, if there weren't that pressure on becoming the youngest man to complete the calendar slam, you'd say, okay, well, you know, look, he can afford to have a dud Australian Open and a lull and take some time to adjust to this really big change. But in his mind, he can't afford that.
Unless he thinks or hopes there'll be the kind of new manager bounce that will carry him to the career Grand
Needs
Slam.
a new manager first.
Yeah.
Allardyce
New
waiting
old
by the
manager.
phone. There were reports I saw online earlier that Alcaraz had said he wanted Andy Murray. I can't find any verification for those, but obviously I want them to be true. Yeah.
I mean, that would be amazing. And I did
I
get a
think
few
Murray
messages
would say
about
no.
that.
My hunch on the basis of our conversation with him a month ago is that he really doesn't want to coach right now. I think he would find that extremely hard to say no to.
Yeah, you don't think it would be like
just
how...
about managing.
But yeah, you don't think it would be like how he had no intention of coaching when Djokovic called him, but then you see that Djokovic is calling you and asking you to coach
exactly.
him.
I don't think he will do that exact same. I don't think he'll reenact that scenario. He can't just keep saying, no, I don't want to coach right now, and then when the actual call comes in, say yes, can he?
True. I mean, you're right, but there aren't that many people who you'd put in that bracket. I mean, there's basically
No.
Djokovic, Sinner, and Alcaraz on the men's side.
Look, I think he'd find it very hard.
I'm just trying to
say
will
no
it to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Okay, look, that's it for part 2. Let's come back in part 3 and look ahead to United Cup and other week 1 of the 2026 tennis calendar events. Can't wait. Welcome back to part 3 of today's tennis podcast, where we look ahead now to proper tennis starting in just a few days' time. The United Cup is the first event off the blocks. The group stages and quarterfinals happening in Perth and Sydney, and then the semi-finals and finals happening in Sydney. We had the news a couple of days ago that Jack Draper is out of the United Cup for Team GB, and in fact out of the Australian Open. The mood music was there, wasn't it, when he pulled out of the 2 exhibitions that he was scheduled to play to start the comeback from the bone bruising to his arm, the injury that had been plaguing him throughout the summer, and that he took a long break from tennis in order to heal following the US Open. He announced it on Boxing Day with a video message on social media, clearly devastated. You know, this is an ambitious guy that is desperate to compete and is champing at the bit and is currently being held back in a cage, and it kind of makes this decision all the more impressive to me, because I think it would have been very easy for him to just give it a go and see how he got on. But he said, I've had this injury for a long time. I'm at the very, very end stages of the process, and to step back on court, back into 5-set tennis so soon just doesn't seem like the smart decision for me and my tennis. This is a worry, though, Charlie, isn't it? Because it's a long time away from the game already. This is a chronic injury that it doesn't seem like there's any kind of surgical solution for, and it's clearly still not healed properly to the point where he's totally confident in it. And long term for Jack Draper, that's a concern.
Yeah, it's really worrying. I mean, those quotes can make it seem like, you know, I guess the positive is that he feels he's coming right to the end of it, and this is just a kind of smart managing of his body. But yeah, it's going to be a long time since he played by the time he comes back in, well, hopefully February at the earliest. And then he's basically going to go straight into Indian Wells, where he's got 1,000 points to defend. That's going to be... That's a lot of pressure, you know, when you haven't played a lot of tennis. And I think that is sensible not to go straight back into best of 5. And it was at the Australian Open last year, wasn't it? Won his first 3 matches, all 5 sets. And then he pulled out against Alcaraz, you know, kind of shell of a man by that point, because he'd played so much tennis. So he knows as well as anyone how demanding that can be. So that does make some sense. But yeah, I mean, just so unfortunate, because he's had lots of injuries before, and then it looked like, you know, he was kind of overcoming them and then getting these great results as a consequence of that, of finally being injury free. I do just feel really sorry for him on a personal level. Like, being injured is just really, really rough. You know, whether you're an amateur, I mean, obviously it's way worse as a professional, but even as an amateur, anyone who's played any sport knows it really does get you down. And I think for him, it must be so wearing and so frustrating having made that breakthrough. Like if you cast your mind back to when he won Indian Wells, and he was then number 4 in the world not long after, and it really did feel, and zooming out as well, like it's a shame for the men's game, because there really aren't that many people who we've thought could be realistic challengers to Sinner and Alcaraz over the last year or so, but he was one of them. He really was. And yeah, you could say maybe we were getting ahead of ourselves, but he beat Alcaraz pretty comfortably on the way to winning Indian Wells. Alcaraz talked about how he was nervous about playing Draper. Like, clearly Draper has some aura in the locker room. And we saw last year he got hurt, Shelton got hurt, Feast got hurt, all of those guys. But yeah, mainly it's just for him. I just feel really sorry for him that this has happened, and I hope it is, a case of he is just being sensible, and it isn't one where it just keeps getting later and later, because that's a little bit what's happened so far with, okay, he'll be back for UTS. He's plenty of time for that. Then that goes, and then it's the next exhibition, whatever's in Macau, I think, and then once those go, as you say, Catherine, I was pretty fearful. It felt, a pretty long shot that he would, that maybe he'd play in Australia, but the idea of him being able to do much there felt increasingly remote.
Do we know, Matt, who's replacing him in the GB squad?
I do know.
Drop the bomb.
Billy Harris.
Big. But I mean, big for Billy Harris, definitely. GB are in Perth, so that's Great Britain, Emma Raducanu and apparently Billy Harris in Group E with Team Greece, which is Tsitsipas and Sakkari. It's always Tsitsipas and Sakkari, isn't it? They are Greece. And then Team Japan, which features Naomi Osaka. You've also got Group C in Perth, that's France. The Rinderknecht Boisson team. Rinderknecht playing alongside someone he's not related to for once. Switzerland, which is Stan Wawrinka and Belinda Bencic. And Italy, which is the Vibesy Caboli Paolini duo. Very into that. And then you've got Group A also in Perth, which is USA. They're always in Perth, Team USA, aren't they? Coco Gauff, I saw a video of her arriving at Perth Airport this morning, and she did have a look of kind of Perth again, is it? About her. She's with Taylor Fritz. It's always Goff and Fritz. You've also got Spain and you've got Argentina. So that's Perth. In Sydney, you've got Group B, which is Canada, and Mboko and Felix Auger-Aliassime. You've got Belgium, which is Zizou Bergs and Elisa Mertens, and you've got China in Group B. You've got Group D, which is Australia, Alex de Minaur and Maya Joint leading the line for Australia. Czechia have got Jakub Menchik and Barbora Krejcikova, and you've got Team Norway in Group D. Matt's just written rude for Team Norway. Anyone know the name of the Norwegian woman that appears at the United Cup and disappears forever after?
I've got Malen Helgo in my head, and I don't know why I would have that in my head if it's not her.
We'll go with it, Matt. Very good. You've also got Group F in Sydney, Germany, Eva Lies and Alexander Zverev. Poland, Świątek and Hurkacz, always Świątek and Hurkacz. And the Netherlands. Are Team USA going to defend their title in the United Cup, Matt Roberts?
Well, Taylor Fritz is going to have to up his mixed doubles game if that is the case, based on what we saw at the US Open. I think they're probably the favourites again. It's funny. I really enjoy the United Cup. Like start of the season, I'm raring to go. I get to listen to you commentating and doing some courtside interviews, Catherine, which is always fun. And yet I never really think like big picture about it. Like I think it's because it maybe doesn't have the sort of baked in history that a lot of the other events have. I don't find myself thinking, should this event be even bigger and better? like I do with the Billie Jean King Cup and the Davis Cup. And I don't really find myself thinking, oh my God, I wonder who's going to win this event. Like, to me, all of that is kind of secondary to its real USP, which is bringing the men and women together and starting the season in like a fun, accessible way. And I don't know whether people feel differently. Like, maybe people are absolutely hanging on the result of the United Cup, and it's one of their like most important events of the season. I don't see it like that at all. I just have like a really good time watching it and treat it as like a really nice alternative to the more regular tour events that also take place in the first week of the season. Like, I think we had a few years of ATP Cup where it really felt like they ruined the start of the tennis season. In the past couple of years, I've actually really enjoyed it again. Like, I think it's a great way for the tennis season to start with these different type of events, and the United Cup plays a big part in that. Like, I'm looking at the schedule, and I know that, barring injury, we're going to get Raducanu Osaka, like, really early into the new season. I'm excited about that. We're going to have De Minaur Ruud, I think, very early into the season. That's one I'm looking forward to. Like, that France, Switzerland, Italy group is fantastic. Like, so many fun names in there. Like, it's just a good time. And as much as I can answer your question and say I think probably Goff and Fritz are the favourites for the US, I just don't really think of the event in that way. It sort of exists somewhere between exhibition and serious for me, and I'm quite happy with that personally. And
I think, Matt, perhaps the reason we don't have all the existential discussion about United Cup is because the United Cup is happy with that as well. I think it's comfortable with what it is and isn't trying to be more or different or tell us it's something it isn't quite. Like, it knows that it's a large part of its value is imparted by its place in the calendar. And perhaps it's the fact that it's owned by Tennis Australia, which also owns the Australian Open. Like, it being a build-up to the event, to the Australian Open, is fine by them because it is all part of the same Australian swing package. But I do appreciate that. Like, obviously they want to big up the event and tell us it's brilliant and make it as good as it can be, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to tell me it's something it's not. I feel like we're all on the same page about what it is. Players, organisers, media, and everyone's kind of cool with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What's the feeling like on the ground? Does it have that same sort of more fun kind of vibe than it is a kind of, we've really got to be winning this? I mean, also everyone's in a good mood, aren't they, at the start of the year?
Definitely. And it's very... Yeah, it is all about the vibe and the freshness, but sort of little indicators always, or one sort of key indicator of this sort of thing of whether it's sort of an event is trying to big itself up more, is whether on-court interviewers ask, what would it mean to you to win the United Cup? Nobody's pushing that agenda or trying to force slightly contrived quotes out of players that slag off the tournament they're in or do it down. But we all know that United Cup champion is not featuring on Coco Gauff's CV anywhere prominently. But I also think that when she's in it, she is competing very, very hard, and I think that is because of its place in the calendar.
Yeah,
and because of the quality of the opposition. She could be. Last year she faced Iga Świątek in her last match before the Australian Open. That matters, and in a way that an exhibition match wouldn't. It's critically more than an exhibition, but it is also imparted its value and its significance and its vibes by its place in the calendar, and I think that's absolutely fine.
No, I think that's such an important distinction, though, is that like when an event doesn't try to kind of ram its importance down your throat, that is such a big turn off.
So who's going to win it, Charlie? Who's going to get it on their CV?
Who is going to, finally tick that box? United Cup champion. How does that sound? It is kind of hard to say because, and this is a bit of a cop-out, but, players will be in varying states of readiness, and competitiveness to an extent, and kind of how much they kind of need the matches, etc., etc. It's tough. I mean, you look on paper, Team USA does look like in a pretty good position.
They've got a mixed doubles specialist.
Yes. But no, I think I would
Spain
say.
and Argentina is a good draw, isn't it? Matt hasn't even bothered to write any of the players in Team Spain or Team Argentina.
Yeah, that's unfair to, I believe it's Munar for Spain.
You're a big Munar guy now.
Yeah, and he was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Didn't even get on the
last
agenda.
year. Sebastian Baez, I want to say, is playing for Argentina on the men's side.
It's a good draw for Team USA, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's all say that Team USA are going to defend the United Cup. I think Team Canada could be fun.
That is a really fun pairing.
Felix,
Very
yeah.
good.
That's good vibes. I mean, Germany, Ava-Lise and Zverev, just as a, kind of just in tennis terms.
Yeah, what's that chemistry going to be like?
I mean, Ava-Lise, obviously, with great memories of Australia from last year. That was a kind of big breakout event.
She's been there for a while. She seems to have gone really early to Australia. I've seen social media content of her in Australia for quite a long time. Maybe she's into the Ashes.
Could be.
She
I would have had more time to train.
Yeah.
She had day 3 tickets.
Other tournaments taking place in week 1 of the 2026 tennis calendar. WTA Brisbane, which is a 500 event on the women's side. Arina Sabalenka in the field there. Amanda Anisimova, Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Madison Keys, Mira Andreeva, Katerina Alexandrova, Clara Towson, Karolina Mukova, Leylah Fernandez. That is, Matt, a heck of a field.
It's so good. I said on our recent Friends Q&A that, look, I love the United Cup. I've just explained why I like it. I also love the first PDF draw of the season that comes out, and it tends to be WTA Brisbane, and it's just straight fire from round 1. Like, there's going to be so many good matches there straight away, and especially as well in the second round. It's a pretty mouth-watering start to the season in Brisbane, and then it's got the ATP 250 event attached to it as well, which is kind of my favourite thing, really, like a 1-week combined event. I know they're at slightly different stages in terms of 250 and 500. It's not exactly the same, but it's just a really good vibe always in Brisbane as well. I tend to think, in my mind, I always think of Brisbane as having like quite a fast court as well. I think it's quite exciting tennis to start the season often as well.
Yeah, it's a good venue, Brisbane.
But this as well does show what we've spoken about so many times before, but the potency of like a little bit of a break, and we're already so much what we're talking about is just the fact that it's kind of the first and everything feels so exciting right at the start. But that would be even more
if this was
hyped.
all in October, Charlie.
Exactly, yeah. You'd just be like looking at that draw, like another draw. Who needs a draw? I'm sick of draws. I'm drowning in draws. Whereas now it's like, give me a draw.
The men's draw in Brisbane, we've got Daniil Medvedev, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, Yuri Lehechka, Tommy Paul, Denis Shapovalov, Joel Fonseca, Leonard Tien, Francis Tiafoe, Valentin Vachereau is a name we pick out in fields now, and Thomas Mahatch.
Absolutely desperate to get a Medvedev Tien week 1 of the ATP season.
I'm just assuming they'll play every week of 2026. That's what they do, isn't it?
Just had such a good time.
Yeah.
Give me that, please, draw gods.
Absolutely. Matt is waiting for the PDF. We have the WTA in Auckland with Svitolina, Navarro, Ayala, Jovic, Sonny Cartel, Donna Vekic, and Venus Williams?
Correct. She has a wild card.
Okay.
Newly married Venus Williams.
Yeah, congratulations.
We have been
Venus.
burnt by Venus Williams wild cards. They're not quite materialising before.
Believe it there was a moment. I only hovered because I thought, could it be Michael Venus? Because he is from New Zealand.
He is.
But Why would he make it onto the agenda when poor old Jaume Munar couldn't? So that was the thought process.
Into a WTA event? Is this a kind of extended battle of the sexes? Michael Venus against the field. This is what give the public what they want.
and again, I think this is a fun start to the season. Like Brisbane is your big hitters on the WTA side, and Auckland's always like a sort of alternative field,
It's indie,
like
isn't it?
is indie. It's kind of your kind of your
main
hipster
stage.
tennis fans. Yeah.
Okay, well, on the indie side of things for the men is the ATP event in Hong Kong, where you've got Lorenzo Musetti, fresh as a dazy from his 4-week-long off-season nursing a newborn
With a newborn.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lorenzo Musetti, Andrei Rublev, Karen Hashanov. Hot putting it from Dubai.
Yeah.
Alexander Bublik and Artur Fils making his comeback. Musetti came out of the blocks last year, Matt, with a new haircut, a new kit sponsor, and a new serve. So
He's
all
already
eyes
got
on
a new
Musetti in
haircut.
Hong Kong. He's already got a new haircut. What's he done?
Yeah. He's gone quite short at the sides.
A fade?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it good?
I haven't seen many angles of it, but I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
The internet, get Matt Roberts more angles of Lorenzo Musetti's new haircut, please. We need a better assessment. The Feast comeback is quite a big deal. I feel a bit anxious.
Well,
about
hopefully. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully he's sort of is ready and he's not doing a kind of what Jack Draper decided not to do. I believe Marin Cilic is also playing that event. If you wanted more vibes, more good vibes. Still knocking around.
that. Thanks for that, Charlie. You a big follower of the Did Marin Cilic Win Today Twitter account?
Does that still
Johnny's
exist?
behind
Their
it.
agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a lovely bloke.
Absolutely. No one's disputing that, Charlie.
I mean, for Mazzetti, I do think, like, given how sort of torturous last year was, towards the end, for him to pick himself up and go again must be, I don't know, it must feel like there is a long way to go from here. Maybe he'll feel refreshed. I don't know.
I mean, in terms of, you said this year he came out with a new serve. I think, his big change this year is he's got a new coach, hasn't he? Jose Perlas has been added to the team. He hasn't ripped up his team. He's added Perlas, who used to work with, I think, Ferrero, in fact, and a whole host of Spanish players of that generation. I think he's worked with Fanini as well more recently. And I think Musetti is one who is like, he's got a shot to close the gap, I would say, on clay. Like I think we certainly saw the improvements he made to his game on hardcourt, and that went a long way to helping him get into the top 10 and get to Turin. But in terms of like Musetti being an actual threat to the big two, I've just used that term. I didn't really mean to use that term, but Alcaraz and Sinner, like, it might be that you get like surface specialists who can do it. Like we might move into more sort of that kind of vibe again. And I think Musetti on clay, he took a set off Alcaraz in Monte Carlo and at the French Open. He won the first set both times, and both times his body let him down. He was having to push himself to such an extreme to live with Alcaraz. But I think just on the tennis front, for a set there, maybe longer at the French Open, he was with him. And I think if he can make the improvements sort of physically, he will see that there's a bit of an opportunity there, maybe to close the gap. Now, that's all very well and good, because then if he'd beaten Alcaraz, he'd have still had to try and beat Sinner and do it again. Like, it's really, really hard. It's going to be so hard. But I do think Musetti is one, based on the season he just had, adding someone to his team who will genuinely be looking at 2026 as a chance to like try and make up some ground on the field. I think he's hungry for it, and that's been a real change, I think, in Musetti over the last couple of years. Like he's super serious now in a way that I'm not sure he always was, and that's quite exciting to me.
Could he be the
might
Ferrero project?
Well, I was just yeah. Maybe. I was just going to say he's my poster boy for it being possible to grow fangs. Imagine what Ferrero could do with him from this point.
Well, let's give Jose Perlas a go.
He hasn't even had a go yet.
Just add them both. It's fine.
Folks, we have our first mascot of the 2026 tennis season. That mascot, what a beauty we have here. It is Remus, owned by Rebecca Monk. Remus is a 1-year-old rescue pup who Rebecca says we got from Dogs Trust just before Christmas 2024. What a wonderful thing. He's a blue Staffy Shar-Pei cross. And after a rough start in life, says Rebecca, he's now settled in well and wants nothing more than to sit next to us on the sofa for snuggles. He's best friends with our 6-year-old daughter, Odette, and they have wonderful fun together. I haven't yet managed to get him interested in tennis, but I'm working on it. Maybe Lorenzo Musetti's new haircut will pull Remus in. He is an absolutely gorgeous boy. I hope you've had a wonderful Christmas together with Remus as a family, with lots and lots of snuggles. I can't stop looking at him and his little foldy over ears. He is absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Remus, for being our first mascot of the 2026 tennis season. We have our mascots and they will be revealed in the coming days. No tennis podcast presenter left on the shelf. No siree. Big announcements to come soon. Matt, let's have some shout outs.
We have Tony and Nancy Zollo, who are self-described long-time listeners from Edwardsville, Illinois.
Tony and Nancy, hello. Charlie, any tennis Tonys or Nancys?
Tony Pickard.
Very good.
Tony Roche.
Yep. There's a Federer
Tony
connection
Godsick.
there, isn't there?
If we're going
was Edberg's
behind the
coach.
scenes.
Edberg was Federer's coach, as was Tony Roche.
Roche.
Is that how you know him?
That's how he was always referred to in commentary, and I was always
Right.
like, "Who is this Roche guy that they're talking about?" And my
There
mum
is
would be
no
like,
name
"That's
that
Tony Roche."
Australians can't put a Y on.
No, it's incredible. And then what was the second name? Nancy.
We've got
did you say?
Nancy Ritchie,
Yeah.
Original 9 member Nancy
Yeah,
Ritchie.
yeah.
Actually, very good tennis names. Well done, Tony and Nancy.
Trying to think of another Nancy.
I think one's
We've got a
enough,
good one.
Charlie. You've got to
Yeah.
know your limits with this game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony and Nancy.
We've also got Michael Gisborne from Yorkshire.
Hello, Michael. A Yorkshire lad.
And Michael says, I've been listening to the podcast since pre-Matt. I first went to Wimbledon in the 70s, and then in 1986 when I saw Jimmy Connors come back from 2 sets down and 1-4 in the third to win, which I think was against Michael Pernfors, wasn't it? That was always rolled out as a Michael Pernfors stat on the Champions Tour, wasn't it? That he once led Jimmy Connors by 2 sets to love and 4-1 and lost.
I've interviewed Michael Pernfors about that exact experience several times.
I'm sure you have. And
He's
Michael
famous for
says,
that, and the man that he was the player that McEnroe was playing when he got defaulted at the Australian Open. Unfortunately, those are the two things that Michael Pernfors is famous for. He's the loveliest man, Michael Pernfors.
And like our Michael, who says, I now watch live tennis most years at the Nottingham Open. I also watch live football, having seen Blackburn Rovers lose at home to Fulham, Reading, and West Brom over the years.
The Holy Trinity. Now, he hasn't said Arsenal, Charlie, but I'm going to assume he's seen them lose to Arsenal as well.
Yes, they're not for a while. Having just not played them for a while, I'm sure they would love to be in a position to lose to Arsenal.
I wonder if it was at the game when we beat them 7-0. Get in touch, Michael.
You two have just done a very smug 15 seconds of football chat between you. Michael, thank you ever so much. It sounds on the basis of those dates like it might be a while since someone's called you a lad, so you're welcome.
And finally, we have Catherine's dad, David Whittaker, for a shout out.
Hello, Catherine's dad.
Catherine's dad says, Catherine, of your own parish, there was a time I didn't know what a podcast was, and happy Christmas.
Oh. And there was a time several years into us producing this podcast where my dad said he couldn't listen because he doesn't get on with headphones. Look at us now. He never misses an episode. He's always the first to listen because I'll get his review precisely an hour after it's gone up.
Has he now altered his view on headphones? Did the sort of ubiquity now of wireless headphones make a difference?
I'd say he still isn't a headphone fan, Charlie. He mostly listens through speakers while stringing tennis rackets or in the car.
Right.
I'd say he's discovered ways around the headphone issue rather than
Embracing it
for himself. Yeah.
And he's listed lots of tennis Davids for us.
Oh, let's hear his list. Law?
Well,
I've got one in my head. I wonder if he's gone with this one.
It starts with Sanguinetti.
Oh, my dad always liked Davide Sanguinetti.
He's also got Ferrer, Nalbandian, Felgate, Wheaton and Lloyd.
I had Prinasil, who is
very
so David
good.
Law coded. He would definitely have much to say, more than anyone would have to say about him.
Yeah, David would definitely have an anecdote at this point.
You, Charlie, pick David Prinasil out of a lineup.
Not a chance. I to the point where I don't think I could tell you anything. I think he's German. I think that's all I could tell you. I know
If
nothing
he
else
walked in
about him.
looking like he did in the 90s, if he walked in frozen in time, could you identify him?
Even then, no, because all I know is his name from draw sheets that I would have read in Wimbledon programmes. This isn't based on having seen
and yet
him,
he was
knowing
the
anything about him.
David that was in your mind.
Yeah,
when
that the name is just so embedded from, and it's not like he would have been going deep in any of these Wimbledon draws, but you know,
no, there
the
are
things that
those
stay
names,
lodged in
aren't
your
they?
brains.
I think Andre Pavel was that guy for me.
Yeah, very Yuri Novak, another one.
Yeah. If that trio walked in now and we had to identify who was Yuri Novak, who
Oh
was
my
Andre
God.
Pavel and who was David Prinasil.
Honestly, if my life depended on it, I don't think I could do
The
it.
fun we would have. The niche fun. Charlie, thank you ever so much for your time and energy and willingness to watch the Battle of the Sexes today. You didn't
very
even watch it
welcome.
live. You watched it.
No, I had to watch. I was driving during it, and so pulled up, checked my phone, and had, north of 100 messages, I think, on our WhatsApp chat, and that gave
All
me
of them
some
good stuff.
impression of all really positive about how great this match was.
We were having a good time.
So I was then, and I've now got to sit through this, not even as live, but well worth it.
Thank you, Charlie. We are, of course, part of the Athletic Podcast Network. Check out Charlie's writing, Matt's writing, James's writing, everything they've got to say. It's good stuff, folks. And look forward to seeing you in Australia, Charlie.
Yes.
Matt, thank you as well. I don't usually
Thank you.
thank you, but it feels rude having thanked Charlie to not
Well,
thank you.
safe travels, Catherine.
Thank you very much. This time tomorrow, I will be on a flight to Perth, all being well.
Are you getting the
hope to-
direct flight? Because there is one, isn't
I'm
there?
not getting the direct flight, Charlie. I did last year, and I did find it a very good experience. But it was really expensive this year, and
Fair enough.
I'm a bit annoyed about it. But Qantas didn't have Wi-Fi on their long distance flights, and I did find that problematic. So swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, it's too long on a plane. You're better off splitting it up.
Agreed. Folks, thank you very much for listening. Just one thing I wanted to say before we close the show today. We had some incredibly sad news in the week. The tennis media community. We had the news that Duncan Mackenzie-McCarg, a colleague of ours, a roving reporter for Stan Sports in Australia, somebody that was an ever-present at Grand Slam tennis events for the past few years and more. He died this week, aged just 41, out in LA where he was based. Incredibly sad news, as you can imagine, and something that's been very much in our minds. So just wanted to pay tribute to Duncan and all his work in the tennis community, and say that we're thinking of all his loved ones at the moment, because that is obviously a devastating thing to have happened. So Duncan and his loved ones very much in our thoughts at the moment. We will be back on Monday, the 5th of January, with David for our next show. Thank you for listening. Happy New Year. We'll speak to you then.